I'd like to welcome everyone to our regular scheduled Portsmouth Township Council meeting on Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019. I'd like to start with disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none. Okay, so moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Sapoulis. Confidential verbal report from Karen Landry, CAO Clerk, regarding the proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with respect to unopened road allowances and lands described as part lots 5 and 6, concession 1, and that staff proceeds as directed. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Sapoulis, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as written and distributed. A. Council meeting January 9th, 2019. B. Closed council meeting January 9th, 2019. All in favor? Carried. Okay, next. We have business arising of previous minutes. Any comments or questions? Seeing none. All right. So on the agenda, we have a public meeting. We have a proposed public meeting for 2019 Budget and Asset Management Program. This public meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 5th, 2019 at 6 p.m. for the Asset Management Program and 7 p.m. for the 2019 budget at the Municipal Complex, 7404 Wellington Road 34. Any comments or questions? Councillor Sapoulis?
Question of the CEO. Will we be given the opportunity as council to review the asset management plan before the meeting?
Yes. There will be a report on your January 30th budget meeting that has the actual report, the asset management plan, and the actual presentation that will be made to the public.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Sure, Councillor Bulmer.
I think Councillor Sapoulis made an excellent point then, and then that document will be available for the public if they want to review it prior to the public meeting as well, I trust.
Absolutely, yep.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Any other? Okay, on to communications. We have the proposed amendment to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Correspondence from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. I may ask the delegate to come down now because that's going to be a lengthy conversation. So we'll ask, who's our first delegation? We have Conservation Halton regarding their operating budget. If you wouldn't mind coming down to the table, please. Welcome.
Good evening. Well, thank you for having us present our budget to you this evening. We've been on a bit of a budget roadshow over the past few weeks, and it's nice to be here tonight. I'll try and not take up too much of your time. As I've done over the past 2 years, I'd like to first maybe give a little bit of an overview about Conservation Halton, and then talk about what our 2019 budget is. And I really want to spend some time on our business plan. In other words, all these programs and services that we offer that are funded in part by our municipal partners, what value are they adding and who do they benefit? So I'd like to spend a bit of time on that. So the Conservation Halton watershed is about 1,000 square kilometers. We've got a population of 612,000 residents within our watershed. CAs, as you know, are based on watershed boundaries, and there are 36 conservation authorities throughout the province of Ontario, Halton being one of them. We have a staff of about 120 full-time people and about 800 seasonal employees. A lot of those employees are working right now at Glen Eden. That's where we have our biggest seasonal staff complement. We own about 9,600 acres of land, so we're landowners within our watershed as well, and I'm sure you're all familiar with a lot of the uses of those lands. They've either been used as conservation areas and parks, or they serve critical purpose in terms of the flood operations with reservoirs and dams on those properties. We have a strategic plan which we launched 2 years ago. It's called Metamorphosis. It's available on our website. And we took a very deliberate it was a very deliberate attempt to transform the Conservation Authority, to really take us from looking at the various programs and services we offered to shifting us to a more customer service focus. And so who are we serving, who's paying for those services, and to what level are we going to provide those services? And that's what forms the basis of our strategy. And we've changed a lot of our operations over the past few years to try and support our strategic direction. Our watershed, as I mentioned, is about 1,000 square kilometers, and a lot of times people find this graphic quite interesting. It shows our watershed, and everything that you see in the yellowish color are the features that we regulate. These are features associated with watercourses, valley systems, and wetlands. This is a provincial regulation that CAs are delegated the authority to enforce, and it's based simply on risk, a risk-based approach to natural hazards to ensure public safety, both of businesses or residents that may want to develop in those areas, but also of the community at large, upstream, downstream communities. The character of our land use has changed quite a bit over the past decade and will continue to change. It's not surprising that a lot of the development is around the southern part of the watershed, with some pockets that you can see in there. That's the town of Milton. Still a lot of cropland, a lot of farmland, and then you can see a lot of the forested area is sort of above the Niagara Escarpment, so that's where you have a lot of the forests. I want to show this visual. It shows a comparison of the same area in Oakville, and the surprise there isn't that you can see the growth that's occurred, but the feature that I wanted to point out is the 16-mile valley that's going right down the middle. And as you can see on the picture on the right, the valley is healthier than it was in 1984. And that's one of the outcomes of what a conservation authority does, which is it enables our municipalities to meet their growth and development targets, but it does so in a way that we can also protect the vital natural systems, not just for their ecological value, but as I mentioned earlier, with a risk-based approach. So that's what's telling in that picture. A similar picture showing the town of Milton, the growth is just much more pronounced. And I suppose what I'd like to point out in this picture is if you start with the picture on the right, in the left quadrant at the bottom, you can see a little blue lake. That's the Kelso Quarry. And if you compare that location in the picture on the left, you can see that it was still a quarry. In fact, it was a quarry as late as my first year at the Conservation Authority was 15 years ago, and the last quarry trucks were just rolling out of there then. So it's quite the transformation in 15 years to go from that picture on the left, which is a scar on the landscape, to the one on the right, and we're just on the verge of opening it up for public use. It's been extensively rehabilitated. It's a beautiful lake, thriving ecosystem, lots of tree planting over the years, and we're looking forward to bringing it into the public domain. So jumping into our budget, the only thing I'd like to highlight from this slide is in our strategic plan, on the first or second page, one of the first targets we said was to look at our ability to increase our own revenue generation and also at the same time try and reduce or limit our increases to the tax-supported part of the budget. So we want to structure the organization so that we have as small an impact on the taxpayers as is possible, knowing, of course, that we provide services that are mandated by the province, so that's important to keep in mind. And what we've done is we've worked with the region of Halton. They're the big funding municipality. About 87% of our budget is paid for by the region of Halton, 87% of the municipal budget. And they're also the ones driving the need for services, right? So you saw Milton, you saw Oakville. That's where the growth is taking place. That's where the permits and the planning process takes place. And there are a lot of pressures to deliver good services, good turnaround times, efficiencies. All of that is important. So we worked with the region of Halton to come up with a reasonable long-term strategy. We didn't want to do our budgets year to year and have big spiky budgets. Instead, This was about doing it, and I noticed you have asset management meeting coming up. That's what we completed last year. We looked at our assets and tried to figure out what were the service levels associated with these assets, how should those levels be maintained, and what money should we be setting aside so that we can responsibly fund those assets. And this has been the result of that strategy in working with Halton Region, where our operating is increasing year to year somewhere between 0.5 and 0.8%. So we're forecasting operating increases well below the rate of inflation. And what you see in the blue and the gray, especially the gray, is what we call our state of good repair levy. So that's looking at our infrastructure and trying to figure out what do we need to put away to ensure that it is functioning well. And if I may, what is this infrastructure that I'm talking about? Well, it's 4 dams, it's 12.5 kilometers of channels, and I feel that, and they were all built in the 1960s, so they're quite old. They require a lot of work, and they're expensive to maintain. It's not every day that you have to rebuild a dam. We're rebuilding parts of the Kelso Dam, and the cost for that is $8.5 million. And lots of risk mitigation efforts that are going into it. So these dams and channels, the service that they provide is probably more critical today than it was when they were built 50, 60, 70 years ago. And the reason for that is we have more people living downstream. We have more intensification. We're removing more of the surfaces that can absorb runoff and turning them into hard surfaces. And then on top of that, you have climate change, which is exacerbating the need for these types of infrastructure to function really well. So we feel we're in a good place. It wasn't a huge dollar amount when you look at these assets. Their replacement value is over $100 million, and the maintenance plan that we'd come up with envisions about $1.5 million a year. Half of that is paid for by the province, so we were looking for about $750,000. But even that, we've stretched over 10 years before we're going to have our reserves at full capacity. And that's looking at a lot of tools, a lot of projects, a little bit of debt financing in there as well, to come up with a reasonable strategy to lower our tax impact. So just very quickly, our total budget is just a little over $35.5 million. That's the budget of the authority. And I'll talk a little bit about how much of that is tax supported. So if you look at the bottom row, our total budget, as I mentioned, is just over $35 million. $9.9 million is what is apportioned to the municipalities, which is an increase when you compare to 2018 of $429,000. And that increase is made up of the operating budget, but a good part of it is made up of the state of good repair levy too. So that's just strictly going to reserves. We receive these percentages from the province, and that's how the budget is allocated. So 87.6% of our budget is allocated to Halton Region, and 0.22% is allocated to Puss Lynch. That's how the apportionments work, and that's what dictates, and that's why the changes or increases are different for everybody. These are the MNRF numbers. I wanted to point out this slide because I mentioned earlier that our emphasis at Conservation Halton is to go to a model where our increases to the taxpayers are as low as possible. And I'd like to direct your attention to the table that's there. As I mentioned, there are 36 conservation authorities in the province. The average conservation authority has 54% of its budget funded by municipal through the municipal taxes, and 35% is self-generated. At CH, we've been able to reverse that trend, where 32% of our budget is tax-supported, and almost 60% is self-generated by us, and then 9% other. That includes the province. I would like to point out that the province now provides 1% of our funding. In fact, it's less than 1% of our funding comes from the province of Ontario. So that's an area where I feel there's some room for improvement, let's just say. In terms of the actual dollar amount and the drivers, the compensation for staff and other inflation is capped at 1.75%, so that's where our expenses are going up at that rate. for debt financing, so we've assumed some debt to repair our dams and channels over the past few years. That's adding a whole percentage to our budget increase. And then, of course, the state of good repair levy, or the asset management levy, brings us to 4.5%. But the key thing there is the 2.4% operating increase. The region of Halton allocates 1.5% a year or this past year was 1.5% for their assessment growth. Once you back the assessment growth out of our 2.4%, you can see that our operating growth is less than 1%. And again, that's a testament to how we've repositioned our programs to. So speaking of programs, here are some of the priority areas for 2019 for us. And I'll run through this part of the presentation. So who benefits from all of these programs and services? I'm going to start with the economic investment that I feel we make within the community. I mentioned in one of our first slides, we have about 800 seasonal employees. Those 800 seasonal employees are paid $4.3 million in wages annually, and none of those wages are tax supported. So that's the economic activity that we generate at our parks, and those wages are paid back into the community. It's run like a business. We don't get bonuses or anything like that. Everything is reinvested back in the parks or in our employees. In terms of public safety, we made that our #1 priority within our strategic plan, and I want to take you through why that's important. So when you look at the first line on the right side, watershed area covered by real-time climate stations. In 2016, we had, so 2 years ago, only 25% of our watershed was covered by those climate stations. By the end of this year, we'll have 70% coverage, and we made this a priority. And the reason that's important is you kind of have to step back and look at why conservation authorities were created. So one of our big areas of responsibility is flood forecasting and warning and operations. We're not just there to manage the dams or in fact try and manage water during a storm event. We're also there to issue warnings and forecasts and bulletins to our municipal partners. That really can't happen if you don't have a network that allows you to capture what is happening. How much rain is falling on the ground? What is the impact of that rain? And because CAs were really given that role after Hurricane Hazel, which was a hurricane. And if you know anything about hurricanes, they're slow, they cover a large area, their path is relatively predictable. So if you look at our watershed, 1,000 square kilometers, you can put a few sensors or rain gauges at the edges and pretty much be able to extrapolate what's going to happen on the landscape. What we see today are more intense microstorm events, and so they're just snaking their way through our gauges, and we were completely blind as to what is going on. So again, that's one of the newer impacts of climate change, where we do need to have a more intense network that gives us broader coverage and real-time insights. What we can do with this now is we can issue a warning that maximizes the amount of time emergency services have to respond, residents have to respond, and also they're more accurate forecasts. And we've also digitized the entire system where you can do all of this on an iPhone, whereas previously it was very cumbersome manual technology. So we're going to continue to invest in public safety. I'm just going to ignore the fact that it's now pink. But it's okay. It's change, yes. some sort of change. Outreach and education. We're quite proud of the fact that we've always invested in that part of our operation. Ways of the Woods camping program is very popular. We've gone from 500 to 600 students 3 years ago to 3,400 every year. 68,000 education program visits. So these are school groups that come out on day trips to Mountsburg and Crawford Lake, and then various other education programs like the Water Festival and Stream of Dreams. Recreation, I mentioned the economic impact of our parks just in terms of wages. But here's another way to look at the economic impact. So in the year just concluded in 2018, we logged 1.1 million visitors to our parks. To try and put that number in perspective, the CN Tower gets 1.5 million visitors every year. So there are a lot of visitors coming to these parks. And, you know, a couple of the special events that we do, like our Hops and Harvest Festival we did for the first time this past fall. So 7,600 visitors or attendees over one weekend. Our bike races, our boat and water sport rentals, the ski and snowboard rental, 28,900 rentals makes us the third biggest ski rental operation in the province. And it's run out of a prefabricated building that was put in to last 5 years, 20 years ago. And so we're squeezing as much efficiency and customer value out of our assets as we can, but we do need to invest in these things. And of course, nothing on the park side is tax supported. The parks receive no tax dollars at all. They're managed by us. If we make money, we're able to invest it back in our infrastructure. And if we don't make a lot of money, then we can't improve that infrastructure. But it is becoming challenging with the growth in population here. We're not at a stage where we have to start thinking about negative strategies to keep people from coming to our parks. I hope we never get there because we can stay ahead with our planning, and we're trying to launch a big project this year to get our local municipalities to really start to value these assets and to recognize that there's a service level associated with these parks. So we're at 612,000 people and 1.1 million visits. We know the population numbers because they're projected, in the growth plan. So the population will double in Halton. Can I go from 1.1 to 2.2 million people at our parks? No, I cannot. So does that mean that future residents need to expect lower service levels and standards in terms of access to green space? Well, I don't think that's right either. So what are we doing to stay ahead of this problem? Are we adding more land into green space? Are we looking to upgrade the facilities? Right now, we're not doing anything. But we'd like to start doing it before you start to get into strategies where you're saying, well, let's raise the prices so fewer people come. Well, that's a very bad thing to do. That's just not the culture. We have a social conscience before we have an economic priority. And so I really hope that I can build some momentum with our municipal partners to really start to look at these assets and how we can manage them, because they do make this area quite unique. A lot of stuff that we do on the restoration and stewardship side, we're very proud of our stewardship program, because what the stewardship program does is it recognizes that the most important and largest landowners are private residents. They're not governments, they're not big businesses. And our emphasis has always been on working with private residents that want to work with us to help them complete whatever projects they'd like to complete on their property. We subsidize when we can the cost of tree planting. Our consultation is always free. So if anybody is interested in taking part in a stewardship project on their own property, all they have to do is call us, and we will put our staff at their disposal. The last metric on that slide, for every dollar that we invest in our stewardship program, we leverage $15.93 from other sources. So the CA is very good at finding money. A lot of this comes through public-private partnerships, through corporations that donate their funds, and they're invested right back in the community through these projects. Some visuals of the projects we completed this past year. In terms of planning and development, as I mentioned, one of our big focus areas in our strategic plan was customer service. We issued 231 permits this past year. We received applications for 231 permits, so I would point that out as well. 96% of our permits were processed within 30 days. The province set a target for conservation authorities to process 85% of the permits within 30 days as a good service standard. We set ourselves a stretch goal of trying to beat that 85% and actually hit 95%. And we thought we would get close to it by the year 2020 because it was a stretch goal. We've surpassed that. Our major permits are going out in 95% of the time in 90 days. Within the minor permit, a lot of our permits are being issued within a week. We have a turnaround time within a week. We especially focus on working with the agriculture community and work with their schedules, for instance, to make getting permits easier. And then, of course, we do a lot of technical reviews as well. And this has happened because of many, many small actions. It wasn't one thing. We did a process re-engineering review. We looked at the scope. What were we commenting on? What should we really be commenting on? And we also looked at our culture. So we really pride ourselves today on working with a lot of applicants that come into our office and trying to get them to a point where we can approve, as opposed to stamping, reject, and sending them back and saying, asking them to do better the next time. So sometimes, even though the permit is taking 30 days, the pre-consultation takes a very long time, and it costs us a lot of money. But I feel it's necessary to try and work with applicants. Most organizations will limit you to a 1-hour pre-consultation, and then you're on your own. Our staff, I've seen them in the hallways with files this big, and they're still at the pre-consultation stage because they're working with the landowners to try and redesign their projects so that they can be in compliance and get a permit. I'm proud of the fact that we have that culture at the Conservation Authority. In terms of our resource management, these numbers keep going up, and of course they get aggregated. So this past year we planted 95,000 trees in the watershed. To date, we're probably around 4.5 million trees planted by the Conservation Authority in the Halton watershed. A lot of monitoring our groundwater stations. I know this council is very familiar with our source water protection efforts, and we continue to work on that front, and we certainly hope that the province isn't thinking its job done on the source water protection front. In a nutshell, these are some of the areas that we're focusing on. I'm happy to take any questions, and I'd again like to thank you for your time.
All right, thank you for your presentation. I'll open it up to the council for questions. Councillor Bomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming back. You mentioned earlier Kelso Quarry. And when I think back to the times that I spent using your facilities, I didn't even think about whose facilities they were. I certainly enjoyed Rattlesnake Point and Mount Nemo a fair bit, camp at Rattlesnake Point. But you mentioned the Kelso Quarry, and I can remember rock climbing at Mount Nemo or spelunking the caves there. Was there a dry quarry behind Mount Nemo?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your plans for that?
It's just been, there are no unique plans for that quarry. It's part of the Mount Nemo complex.
Yeah.
It's treed in fully, and people are quite often shocked when they find themselves in the middle of that quarry as they're on a hiking trail.
Yeah.
It's quite surreal to stumble upon it if you don't know it's there. But we don't have really any plans. It's quite a sensitive area, as you know. It's right on the escarpment, and Mount Nemo is really a park that's suited well for the passive recreation, more so than a Kelso, for instance, which is a lot more active recreation.
Super. Well, it's funny. I had forgotten all about it until you mentioned the Kelso one. So thank you for that. You talked about visitors to your parks, and in the report you provided us up front, you talked about, there was a thing about a visitor impact and monitoring program.
Yes.
How does that relate to, you talked about trying to grow your, can you just describe what a visitor impact and monitoring program is?
Yes, I certainly can. So we would like to grow the visitation at our parks because we'd like more people to access it. However, we have to take a sustainability approach to this. So we have to look at the social benefits and the social impacts of our parks, the environmental impacts, and the economic impacts. The visitor management statement is going to be tracking the degradation, if you will, of trail usage, edge of the forest habitat, any other areas that are suffering, and actively try and mitigate those impacts as you can. So that might mean decommissioning a trail to allow it to regenerate. It might mean pulling something back from the brow of the escarpment, and eventually it'll mean bringing in green energy and just lowering the environmental footprint. So it's that sort of program. We can't just ignore it.
Well, that's great. You've completely turned around my understanding. It's funny. I thought it was you're going to be measuring the impact on visitors and monitoring the visitors, as opposed to the impact that the visitors are having
on the environment.
And monitoring that. That's great. I was trying to figure out, are you going to tag them with GPS units or something? The last piece I was fascinated by was you talking about science and partnerships in your report too, about 101 million and 101,154,000 for emerald ash borer. This comes up often. People talk about emerald ash borer, about treating them, to preserve them. How many trees can you treat for that? And are these at a special location? This isn't to treat them across the watershed wholly, is it?
It's not a treatment at all, in fact. The $1.1 million, which is funded by Halton Region fully, is for the removal of ash trees. So we anticipate having to remove around 250,000 ash trees, or 250,000 ash trees within our watershed, and it's a 10-year project. So that amount in our program does not envision any treatment.
In the report, it talked about it as a treatment, so it makes more sense. This is the management, the removal.
This is the management.
Yeah. The GRC has similar things here, so that's more consistent with the groups. That is a challenge, I got to say, because I know here, especially when we had the ice storm a couple of years ago, and it's in one of our reports as well, that the GRCA too struggles in some of their passive recreation spots, and these things really can create a hazard in passive recreation areas. So I understand the need to take care of it. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Goyda?
Thanks very much for coming, and thanks for your presentation. The business plan, I think, is an excellent business plan, and it's clear that a lot of work and expertise have gone into it. And even by department, there's individual business plans, which I think is really great. It's also really great to see that you're able to bring in so much program revenue to really reduce the impact on the municipal funding, and that you're so well below the average. You talk about undergoing the asset management the plan. Yes. We're also doing that here at the township. And does that plan include just existing assets, or does that also take into account new infrastructure and those types of things that may be required in the future?
Just existing assets.
Just existing.
And it allocates a service level to those assets, and so that we then put them in a category of what is critical, what do you get at first, and what can wait. And so we phased it, and so for us, the dams and channels were the most critical. And then our phase 2, which has come online, is looking at our other facilities, right? So you don't think about it, but when we looked at it, we owned 230 structures, buildings of various shapes and sizes, and they have to be incorporated. And then the third phase is looking at other equipment, but just current existing assets and ones that have a service level associated with it. And then in putting a plan together, we also decided to decommission some assets because we didn't feel that they needed to be providing a service in the future. So that's one way of kind of looking at the future, not what you're going to add, but potentially what could you take away. And that removes the liability and it removes the cost.
Okay. One of the long-term initiatives in the capital forecast includes the modernizing of the flood forecasting. And my question really was, how do you kind of do that, especially with climate change and these sort of extreme weather events that are happening? I think you kind of answered that with that you put more sort of stations throughout. How does that translate into emergency management and emergency response, I guess, in the event of those sort of weather events?
So that's a very good question. So prior to 2016, the technology that was being used, if you set aside the number of gauges and how much coverage they give you, was have you seen the movie E.T.? Well, it was that kind of technology, right? So very digital, very telephone based, and what we've done is we've digitized it so it's real time. So it's not good enough for us to know how much rain is about to fall or is falling. You can get that from the weather network. Our expertise comes in to explain what that rain is going to mean for a certain neighborhood, a certain section of a city. And to generate those insights, we have to develop models. that look into all sorts of forecasts. They take in 60 years of historical data. And so when we see a storm coming, we pull that data from the radars and we park it over a community, and those models tell us what is going to happen on the landscape, because that's what's important, not how much rain is coming. So you need a network that captures that rain. Then you need models that can analyze that and tell you, we think this is what's going to happen. And those models need to be updated all the time because the weather patterns are changing and the landscape changes. So the way it was going to impact Milton 10 years ago is not going to be the impact on Milton this year, because it's just a lot more pavement. And then what we've done to give as much lead time to emergency services is actually quite simple, because we've digitized all of this. 2 years ago, an alarm would go off and then an email would be sent to our flood control operations person. Assuming that person was really on it, they would pull it up on their BlackBerry and it would say, we think this is happening. That person would then log into their computer and type an email and send it out to the fire departments, the school boards, and the municipalities. They may or may not read that email. They may or may not get it. They may or may not still be working there, in which case you get a bounce back to say, person X isn't here anymore. What happens now is, because we've got this digital system, the minute a sensor picks up something outside of the parameters, so we've said if it goes above this, it's a problem, we need to know. That sensor communicates directly to the cloud, and an email from there goes directly to the fire departments. It doesn't come through us. And so we've cut down all of those steps and all of those potential delays and missteps where you're now getting real-time data. And municipal staff, if they would like, we give them login information so they can actually see the data from our sensors and our flow levels in real time at their municipalities, because we're sharing all of this. It's not something that we want to keep to ourselves. So we have some municipalities that have just acquired access themselves. So all of those things combined, so lots of little things, have resulted in refinements, and we're going to continue to work on that. Just because we managed to catch up to 2016 technology doesn't mean we can allow ourselves to fall back again over the next 10 years. So it has to be a sustained investment in this system, so you're always at the leading edge.
That's good. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Sapoulis?
Yes, thank you for your presentations. Very inspiring to see that you're really getting a lot of self-generated revenue compared to the other CAs. My question relates to the asset management plan. It's a two-part question. First of all, what's the time frame for a fully funded plan, and how is this going to be achieved, specifically impact on our municipal levy increases year over year?
Thank you. Good question. So we're going to achieve fully funded status over 10 years. The amount that we're looking for is about $860,000. So that is the amount that needs to be going into the reserve every year. Of course, we're assuming that the 50-cent dollars we get from the province will continue. If they don't, then we'll have to revisit that. And the impact right now, so in order for us to put it simply, we need to get to $860,000. And we need to get there in a way so that there isn't a huge tax bill any one year for the taxpayer. So we work with the region of Halton to try and model that. And what they've done is they've assumed a 1% increase every year until we reach that reserve level. So that's what the anticipated impact is. Now, in any given year where we can reduce our operating expenditure by whatever means, we'll try and absorb that 1% into our general budget. And if we can't, then it'll be this special levy on top until we achieve the reserve levels that we need.
Great, thank you very much.
Councillor Rowe?
I think most of my questions have been answered. I just have to touch base on my little buddies, the Emerald ash borer. I always ask this question, but it just is amazing how much money we spend on this species of insect. Like it's $6,862,000 over 8 years, and this is just one small portion of the pie. Like,
Yes.
the municipalities, are we losing the war, or are we winning the war?
Well, we've lost the war when it comes to
Yeah.
EAB. There's no pretending that we haven't. When it comes to what other impacts will there be on our forests, whether we win or lose that war depends on whether we're willing to invest in monitoring and taking care of our forest resources. I always say that everybody wants to support me planting new trees because it's cooler. You get photo ops, and it's kind of nice to say I planted 100,000 trees and I did ceremonial tree planting. Nobody actually wants to pay money to be able to manage the forest resources that we already have. And the amount of luck that a new seedling requires to actually grow into a full tree and start providing environmental benefits is enormous. Whereas you've got these woodlots and forests all around here that are already providing those goods and services, and all we have to do is get in there and manage them and maintain them and ensure that we're building resilience. And that might be monitoring for invasive species when they start happening. That might be looking at managing and thinning out the canopy so that there's succession naturally. A lot of these forests are plantations, right, from 50, 60 years ago, so they're monoculture. They will not survive on their own because there is no natural species mix. So one of the things, and you'll see this in our business plan, is we've really started to dedicate some internal resources to forest management. We need to come up with a proper forest management or landscape management plan and start to take care of these, because the cost of removing them is just absolutely ridiculous. I've been driving in and out of Mount Nemo this past week on my way to various meetings, and we've had a crew of five trucks from one of the local contractors, and they've barely made their way up, halfway up the trail. So you can see why the costs are so high for these tree removals. And the risk, of course.
So once all the ash trees are dead, which is probably going to be inevitable, will these insects move to a different species of tree?
No. So these insects will then die out, and we're hoping that the ash trees can then start to regenerate. They will eat themselves out of a home, essentially. And you see this with a lot of species. You see it with gypsy moth as well. Their populations go this way because they peak and then they defoliate so many trees that there aren't enough to support the species the following year.
Yep.
But you can only know what is happening if you've got people in the field who are counting the pupae and the other signs of this to say next year is going to be a terrible year for trees. We better do something, whether it's aerial spraying or some sort of mitigation. So you can stay ahead of this at least, if not win the war.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a great presentation. I really appreciate the efforts to mitigate the burden on the taxpayer through your revenue generation. Question about the notices to the fire departments. Do you have Puslinch Fire on the email list for those?
I'm almost certain we would. But I can double check. But
I know I'm
sure we do.
Have a small section in your area, but there are some creeks down there. And just another point I want to make is that the 96% for the 30 days, or for the permits, I had 2 of those go through, and it's just wonderful that it's not another holdup for somebody trying to build. And it was a surprise to me in Morrison that I was in Halton Conservation, so that was a nice eye opener. And my family and I have taken advantage of CalSO. It's a wonderful facility, and we appreciate the work you do.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, Mayor, we are going to get it wrong every now and then, right, on the permit side, and we will drop the ball. But we have a system where we take that very seriously. It comes straight up to me and my senior team, who work very hard, and all employees. We chase down every complaint, and we try and figure out why it happened and how we can improve the situation. So I'm glad your experience was positive. When you started telling the story, I wasn't sure. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Sepulveda, seconded by Councillor Goya. The council received the presentation by Conservation Halton with respect to the 2019 budget. All in favor? Carried. I'll invite the City of Guelph delegation down in regards to the Niska Bridge. welcome.
Thank you.
Hand over the floor to yourself. And
I hope to be brief. It's been a while since we touched base with Post Lynch on this project. I think you're mostly familiar with what happened when we got through the EA, which we finally got the minister's order late 2017. Since that time, we have reconstructed Niska Road on the City of Guelph side. We have commenced the construction of the bridge. It's going on right now. We hope to have it completed by June of this year, the bridge itself. And then after that, we are looking at moving back in with the same contractor we had on the city side to do the works that is on Post Lynch. I believe we had sent off drawings for review early on at that time because of everything else that was going on. We decided that it would be a better touchstone closer to the time of construction, which is essentially now. As part of the EA, and in my letter, I attached the correspondence we had from way back in 2013, which essentially allowed for reconstruction of the road to match the existing profile. That is part of the design, but you'll notice in the design, which is in your packages, that there is also now a multi-use path, there is a wildlife crossing, and there is wildlife funnel fencing. So we'd like to make sure that Post Lynch is happy with what you're going to be getting when we are done with the project, which is hopefully in August of this year when we hope to open the road again. I think that hits the high points. If you've got any questions.
open it up to the floor. Councillor Bomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Welcome to Post Lynch. I hope you enjoy our humble council chambers. It's quite a process you've been through out there, and I understand you're in a pickle. That was reading all the reports as the EA went through and all that stuff, and I must admit, as I read them, I couldn't help think that, boy, wouldn't it be great if Stone Road went through instead, but that's another bridge. Maybe it's a bridge too far. But just a couple of questions on the issue at hand today. One of the things I don't remember discussing in the past was relates to concern. There was some concerns about, of course, when you go from a one-lane bridge to a two-lane bridge, the chance for increased traffic using this route. And I don't recall if we ever came to any understanding about cost sharing related to any additional impacts that might occur due to the increased traffic flow. Can you recall if we came to any agreement on that?
So I will say that the traffic flow on this, as far as I'm concerned with this project, has been the biggest red herring that's around. In the sense that I'm not a traffic engineer, so I've read the EA, I've talked extensively with the traffic engineers who've done the modeling. The bridge itself was not considered any traffic calming, mitigation, anything for Niska Road. All the traffic increase expected, and it's documented in the EA, is based on background growth of, I would say, both municipalities, arguably more from the city of Guelph than Post Lynch, but it's not, the bridge has never been the driver for the traffic growth. That being said, we were looking at it as a replacement. I am not aware of any cost-sharing agreements that come into the use of the road itself in that respect. I don't know where you would go with that.
Okay, no, that's a fair comment, and I don't disagree that a bridge itself does not generate traffic. I know it was a point of concern through the process, and
it still is.
I understand. I guess so what we're looking at is the potential that if it's any increase in traffic flow and impacts of the road that are greater than background growth, we might attribute to increased traffic due to the two-lane bridge, but that'll be determined in the future, I guess. That may be a question for council to discuss on its own sometime. But to your other point, I guess the question you're here for today is, do we have any concerns with the other enhancements you're talking about? I think they're great. Well, our residents and your residents will both benefit from the enhancements you're talking about. But again, to go back to the cost to maintain those in the future? Because these are typically things that they're not there now. Are these features that the city will then participate in the maintenance of these additional features?
So we had been asked about the multi-use path snow removal. Subject to proper agreements being in place, our Public Works Department is willing to clear the multi-use path up to the proposed termination, which is about the existing snowplow turnaround. I know requests have been made for discussing how snow removal is being done. I know, I believe the replaced bridge will provide opportunities for discussions on that, but I don't believe that's gone anywhere yet. We can facilitate that. The other components would be a wildlife crossing and the funnel fencing, which I do not expect to be largely more costly than you would have otherwise. Our position right now would be that it becomes your property in your municipality. I don't know how you would get around that, but if discussions need to be made, then we will entertain them. I believe the wildlife crossing, considering we've put 3 on the city side and it's a contiguous forest, makes sense. Our experts say the same thing. But again, this is on your property, so to a certain extent, it comes up to your discretion on whether or not we put it in.
Or at least the city's open to those discussions. It's not a closed matter, so that's
I
all.
don't believe it's been a closed matter on any of these, no.
Because I know you have several on Laird Road as well. After you reconstructed Laird Road, I think there's at least one on Laird Road between Gordon and the Hanlon. I think it's a turtle crossing or an under road crossing. So, okay, those are mostly my concerns related to this. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilor Goyda.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Being new again to council, I did a little bit of digging on Niska Bridge just to learn a little bit about the history. And in doing so, I realized that this is a bridge that was put in a long time ago, and it was really only meant to be there for 1 year. And it's been there, I think, for over 40 years before it was taken down. And certainly, I'm sure a lot of things have changed in those 40 some odd years, including the traffic and including the neighborhood on and around the area. And I think Councillor Bulmer has already kind of touched on this, but it's my understanding that prior to the bridge being removed, that the traffic count was about 4,000 cars per day. I don't know if that's accurate, but it would seem likely that once the bridge becomes a 2-lane bridge, that traffic count would increase. And I don't know if you have any kind of gauge as to how much that might be.
So, first of all, the 4,000 number is an accurate number. If I remember correctly, they were the bridge studies, the OSIM reports is what they're called, I believe had it around that number in 2013. So it has been a number we've been going forward with. We did look at the traffic studies in here. And again, the bridge is not considered the driver in there, but as you say, the background growth, there is expected to be more. Section, if I remember correctly, 4.4 of the EA had projections to the 2035? 2031. And they're in vehicles per hour, but across the bridge, essentially it went from, in 2013, 510 per hour, and in 2031, the projections are 730. So it is all in the EA. Mm-hmm. Again, I want to stress that the growth is based on background studies, not because the road, we have maintained 2 lanes. They're actually narrower lanes, but it is the bridge itself. So what was it before? 25 meters or so. Is going from a 1-lane portion to a 2-lane portion.
The reason that I'm asking that is because the road on the Puss Lynch side, in speaking with the Director of Public Works, is a 60-millimeter asphalt surface, which I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, is meant to be handling, a ton of cars, traffic, and so one thing for us to think about and talk about is that that road will likely have to be upgraded if the traffic count is in fact much greater than it is now. And I don't know if that's been considered. I know that's not really what we're necessarily talking about today, but that would just be sort of one point that I would have. In terms of the wildlife crossing, I did just have a question. I had the opportunity to look at a couple of those on Maltby Road. And I'm just wondering, are the ones being proposed here, it's difficult to gauge the size of them by the drawing, but would they, I don't know if you know the ones I'm talking about, but would these be the same sort of size as those ones? Do you know?
Can I ask your Director of Public Works what size are on Maltby Road?
Maltby, Ken, is the concrete box culvert we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
I don't know the actual size of it, but
So something along the 1.2 meter?
yeah, I
box?
would think you're probably in that range.
So these are smaller than that. They are not a box structure. We recently put in some on Eastview Road. I believe it was also 3 on Eastview Road, but I'd have to check. These are I believe a fiber reinforced plastic that is right at road surface with grates in there. We are monitoring them right now on Eastview Road for effectiveness as well. They've only been in there this is their second season there.
Is there any danger of a kid getting in there?
No,
Okay.
they are much smaller than that.
They're smaller
They are.
that they couldn't get, like a child couldn't get in it?
A child could not get in it, no.
Okay. Do you know what the life expectancy is of one of the, like, will it need to be replaced at some point in time?
Well, everything needs to be replaced at some point in time. My understanding is it would be probably a life cycle of the asphalt. I don't know how long these have been in place in other places, and I can look into it more, but that's my understanding right now. So I would expect you're looking at, a resurfacing every, 25 years? Something like that for a resurfacing do you go to 50?
Yeah, not for our standard of 60 mil. I think we're probably more around the 15-year mark.
15?
Yeah.
Okay. So I can definitely find out more information on the longevity of them,
Yeah.
but they are supposed to be designed for roads. They have been used elsewhere, so.
And do you happen to know the cost of that portion of the project?
Off the top of my head, no, but I can definitely provide that.
Okay.
We do have them separated out per meter in our contract.
Okay. And then I guess the last thing is the multi-use path. And I think, again, Councillor Balmer has touched on that, is if it goes through to the turnaround point, I guess, is there opportunity to work with the City of Guelph for having snow removal on that when they remove snow on, I guess, the Guelph portion of it?
Yes, that is already in the works.
Okay.
Our Director of Public Works has also already said that they're willing to go
Okay.
past there, again, subject to proper agreements that allow us to go on your side. And if I could touch on the one comment you made about the longevity of the road, I would like to point out that generally the traffic that deteriorates a road quickly is truck traffic. We are still, even though the bridge will be designed to accommodate trucks, we are still limiting trucks. The truck exclusion zone will be extended to the city limits. Right now, it ends, I believe, at Ptarmigan Road, although technically they couldn't go over the bridge because it was load restricted. But truck traffic still isn't going to be there, and that is generally what will wear down the road the fastest.
Okay.
It's not usually your regular passenger vehicle.
Okay. Thank you.
Lewis?
Yes, I'm glad to hear that you're open to discussions on long-term maintenance costs, and I guess we should put in that kitty the capital replacement costs that we have to replace that ATCO pipe for wildlife or any additional remedial work on the walkway. Before I ask one more question of staff, staff, what is your position with respect to the road? Our portion of the road is something that we'd be willing to give up, pass over to City of Guelph?
In my opinion, I would say we'd definitely be open to discussion, but we have to be cognizant of that. We only own 100% of a portion of that road, with the portion also being a boundary road with Guelph-Aramasa as well.
Okay, so after I ask the questions, I guess we'll go around again and ask staff put a motion forward. With respect to the truck traffic, are you going to have a barrier that will restrict the height of the trucks going through or vehicles going through? Like you see in a parking lot, you do have steel piping or whatever the case may be.
So at this point, on the City of Guelph side, no. It was brought forward in our public meetings as an option. It is not completely ruled out on our side in the sense that if there are issues, it is still easily able to be added.
Okay.
We did talk about this with Guelph-Aramasa, and they do not want it on their side. So the issue we've had with truck traffic in that sense for a barrier has been because some have asked us to put a different type of bridge up that it has a barrier on it as well. If you have a truck that makes it to the bridge, now what? If there's a barrier there, and very unsafe. So as much as I don't want trucks at the bridge, I would rather see them, if they're at the bridge, get ticketed, which is outside of my ability to do personally, and then keep going across in the right direction because it's the safest.
Okay. That's all I have after we finish our motion.
Councillor Roth?
Yes, thank you. I am really glad to hear that Guelph is open for discussions, because I think there'll have to be some.
Yeah.
I would not be able to support this unless there's some really good discussions. And we just can't afford to pay for some of these luxuries that are on this particular road. And I would hope maybe Guelph would, after doing all this work, you might as well own the road, just buy it. Real cheap. Anyway, I know we have a problem there too, but I hope that the dialogue continues.
May I ask which components you're calling the luxuries?
Well, the critter tunnel and the fencing and the multi-use trail. I mean, we have nothing there now, and we don't have that many people on that road that, you know, it's the City of Guelph that's going to be benefiting from that probably more than Township of Pushledge. We have roads closer to heavier populations that would serve our community better. That's just, I mean, again, it's discussion that we haven't had as a council, that it has to be discussed.
Okay. All right, thank you. I have one question for our road superintendent. If he has any concerns, other than the maintenance costs and, you know, replacement costs with the wildlife trail and the walking trail, do you have any concerns with them going in?
No, I do not.
Okay, so I agree with Councillor Wolf that, you know, it'd be nice to have some, you know, discussions about, you know, the cost impact on our township. We're struggling, as every municipality is. We have multiple projects on multiple boundary roads, and I want to ensure that we're cooperative on all fronts, and I want to build on a positive relationship with the City of Guelph. We have a multi-boundary, you know, that's going to be up for discussion. So, yeah, I look forward to those discussions. And another question to the Director of Public Works: is Guelph-Aramasa still contracted to maintain our portion of that road?
We still maintain a verbal contract with Guelph-Aramasa at this point.
So how much of that road do we own? Because I used to plow that, and where's the actual boundary?
when you're coming off of Whitelaw onto Niska to head to the bridge, the first portion is the boundary road to when you get to the 90-degree bend.
And
Then it becomes ours.
okay. Do we, and there isn't any Puslinch residents between that bend and the bridge? Is there any houses between there? There is some?
Yes, we have done some severances in that location.
Okay.
Between, like, just on our portion?
Yeah.
I would suggest that there's maybe one.
Okay.
There's more.
Okay, I'll look it up. but-
On the boundary road, there is.
Yeah.
But not just on our portion.
Okay.
So those are just my questions, and, like I said, I want to work with the City of Guelph, and I want to build on our relationship, because there's multiple projects coming forward, so I appreciate your presentation, and I'm going to pass it over to councillors.
Yes, I'd like to suggest we ask staff to review whether or not giving up the road makes sense, and if so, enter negotiations with Guelph to see if they would accept the road, in addition to obviously the ongoing maintenance cost and long-term capital implications.
You have a seconder for that, so we can discuss this? Sorry. Do you want to talk with MCAO?
If you don't mind, I'll let you have your discussions, and then perhaps maybe I can sum up what I've heard.
Sure. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Goida? Okay, Councillor Ballmer.
No, I support that. I think we need to investigate this. This option came up during the environmental assessment discussions early on, and that considering how few residents we have on the road, it only makes sense that we look into this, at least, have the discussions with Guelph Moss and the City of Guelph to see who's best served by owning the road. So I support the idea.
Okay. Councillor Goida?
Yeah, I would support that as well.
Councillor Roth?
Yes.
I would support investigating, and if that isn't a prospect, would Guelph Hermosa also be an option there, since they already own Whitelaw? So between the three of us, I think we should, anyways, we'll leave your motion as is, and but MCO wants to make some comments. Once she finishes writing.
I've worded it just that that staff requests the City of Guelph to provide maintenance and life cycle costs related to the wildlife crossing, fencing, and multi-use path, and that the City of Guelph advise what services and costs they are willing to contribute for these amenities, and that the sale of the road to the city be considered. I don't know if that captures everything.
That's, yeah, it's to be considered if you, as staff, believe that's the right way to do it.
Okay, Mr. Mulally.
I was wondering if you want, should we tag on Guelph Hermosa as well in this discussion?
I only suggested because they own Whitelaw.
Yeah, and perhaps they want to sell their portion to the City of Guelph too.
It's not my decision if we're out buying.
You didn't come shopping.
I did not. I came here trying to build a road.
We're just trying to get you more road.
Okay, so I'll just, in respect to Councillor Sapoulis' motion, I'm going to call a vote. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Oh, yeah. Moved by Councillor Goida, seconded by Councillor Sapoulis, that council receives the presentation by the City of Guelph in respect to the Niska Road Bridge reconstruction, and the staff, want me to read the whole thing?
No, it's okay.
Okay. All in favor of that one? Carried. Thank you. Thank you again. Now, we're going to go back to communications. We're going to discuss the letter for the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And once everybody... Anybody have questions or comments regarding the correspondence? Councillor Ballmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm glad this was included in our council package. It's very timely. And I expect we'll see a report from planning staff. But what I found interesting is that, when I read through it the first time, I did have some concerns about some of the changes in language and some of the subtle changes. But each time I read it again, and I read it a few times, not just the notice, but the actual proposed amendment, it started to make a little bit more sense. And some of the things that just to give you some examples, Well, they talk about in the amendment making it easier for the expansion of settlement boundaries, reducing, allowing them in between a full municipal review. And, when we talk about concerns about the expansion of Guelph and Cambridge, of course, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But those type of settlement expansions may be different from annexation. So it's not clear that what they're talking about here is softening the boundaries of municipalities, but perhaps allowing built-up areas within a municipality to expand, which, may be of benefit for some place like Centre Wellington if they wanted to have a modest expansion of Fergus or Elora, but not expand outside their municipal boundaries. So, first pass through, seeing that softening of boundaries is a concern, but when you put it in context, maybe it's not as bad as I might have thought. I also found the same when they talk about the existing places to grow talks about the importance to control low-density urban sprawl, and the revised version wants to replace that language with controlling. They want to make sure they have managed growth. You could read that and say, well, that's fine as long as low-density urban sprawl is managed. Then that's considered acceptable. So that was a concern the first time I read that. But if you read further through, it was nice to see that they've sort of, I don't want to say doubled down, but restated the importance of, I call it intensify first. The plan still is intensity first, which I think is a good thing. And when you look at some of the flexibility that's been added for density, that may make sense too, especially when you put it in context when they want to have increased densities around transit hubs. So again, when you come across some changes, it seems like it's a shock, but in the context that followed it made sense. On the plus side, I must say I was quite pleased to see the changes in the implementation of the agricultural and heritage mapping. That's something we've talked a fair bit about here, and as someone who operates a farm, I was terribly concerned about the inaccuracy of the agricultural mapping. I'm absolutely supportive of protecting all of our class 1 to 3 farmland, and I would even support having some enhanced protections for our class 4, since so much class 1 to 3 has been lost over the years in other areas of the province. But with the current mapping showing classes 5, 6, and 7 as being prime agriculture, that undermines the trust in everybody's mind as to, are we really protecting the right thing? So I'm really encouraged to see the changes in terms of when that mapping will come into force, and that it will actually, looks like we're going to be able to do some of that proofing of that mapping locally as part of our update to the official plans, as opposed to previously we were only going to be able to deal with the candidate areas. It looks like we'll now be able to proof the entire designation. I think that's a great step for us. It was nice to see the permission to round out urban settlements. We've long wanted to round out Morriston. Unfortunately, it does still maintain the exclusion for urban settlements or rural settlements in the Greenbelt. So I understand that. I support much of what the Greenbelt sets out to achieve. After all, we want to make sure we protect the natural environment here as well. But it's nice to know that perhaps we could round out Aberfoyle if there's places outside the floodplain where we could do something. That's good to know. So on balance, I don't think it's as bad as I thought the first time I read it through. So I'm looking forward to reading the report from the county to get a handle on it. I'm also be interested, one of the pieces I'd like to, if we could ask the county to address, there's 2 pieces that I'd like them to speak to directly when they do write the report. One would be the piece about expansion of settlement areas and versus annexation, to help people understand whether this changes how we understand the hard boundaries that are currently in place around Guelph and Cambridge. And the second piece would relate to a change that I saw mentioned there relating to utilization of design guidelines. I saw that piece was removed also from, and how they're utilized. So those are documents that are important to us here. We've made use of them, and it'd be interesting to see if the county staff could comment on that. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bulmer. Councillor Goyda.
Thank you. In reading through the amendment, I found it to be incredibly lot of information to absorb. And so I was speaking with county staff to try and get a better understanding of what this all means. And they seem to think, at least in the preliminary stages, that this seems to be a step in the right direction, specifically in regards to the natural heritage system and the agricultural system mapping, to hopefully get it a little bit more refined to the actual features. They did tell me that they had a county planning committee meeting on February the 14th, and by this letter that's in our council package, it looks like we have until February the 28th to make comments and feedback. And so I was wondering if we could include the report from the county at our February 20th council meeting, so that at that time we could possibly prepare comments.
Yes,
regard,
I've
yeah.
spoken to the county planning department, and they've indicated that they will share it with me once it's gone to their planning committee, but prior to it going to their council, so that it can make our February 20th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Spools.
Yes, just wonder if we can ask the county staff to be here on the 20th and give an overview. I certainly share the sentiments of both Councilors Bulmer and Goyda that it is a positive step in the right direction, and I'd like to get a professional opinion from Wellington County and have them here to answer any questions we may have, so we can amend their letter as we see fit, depending on the answers that we get.
I will make the request.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Roth.
Yes, I agree 100% with everything that's been said. So I think we'll get a much better idea once the county gives us their report.
I agree. I was in contact with the county planning staff, and we have a delegation request. Do we want to talk about that now? Sure. Delegation request coming up for Roma to discuss this exact issue, the prime ag mapping and natural heritage feature. And county staff, their opinion was to possibly cancel that delegation and to give this process a chance. We have AMO coming up in August. If we're not liking the direction of the process, we have an opportunity to address the minister then. And then, the other question was, we didn't want to waste his time and go in and say, thank you very much. He's an important individual, limited time. I would suggest that we cancel the delegation with the cause that we respect the direction that we're going with it. I don't know if you need a motion for that or just general consensus, Madam CEO?
No, I just need council's direction on that.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I think we need to give this a chance. I think everybody agrees this is going in the right direction. It looks like they're going to take the local knowledge into account, and that's a benefit for our community. So let's hope it goes the right direction. Okay. So next one is the Mill Creek monthly report. Any questions or comments on that?
No.
None. Intergovernmental affairs. All right, so we have some correspondence from the year-end assessment report supporting municipal council. Any questions or comments? None. Next is the board of directors attendance. Any questions or comments on that one? None. GRC strategic plan. Any questions? Councillor Bulmer?
Just one point. They talk about here in the strategic plan, I believe this is the document where they talk about they're continuing to review some of their passive recreation lands for possible sale. We're very fortunate here. We have numerous passive recreation lands that the GRCA owns, and I understand there is some cost associated with it. I especially after that ice storm I mentioned earlier, we heard about the challenges they face in the bond tract trying to keep the trails safe in there. But when you consider how many people these these lands do draw to our community. I think even in this report, they recognize that they do draw a lot of people. I think there are maybe one or two of the smaller ones that have no trails, but we do have several that do get a lot of attention and bring people to our small businesses. When you think of Starkey Hill in Arkle, or the Bond Tract, or the Twin Lakes down beside the 401 there at the Puslinch Tract, where the Guelph Off-Road Bike has a trail. I'm hoping that they decide to keep the majority of them. But I don't know if there's a way. We've been talking about this to Friends of Milk Creek, because we want to make sure that the Bond Tract remains. But I'm not sure if there's a way for our municipality to participate in this, because these are recreational lands that are being provided that, we don't have to provide. This is a benefit to our community that we're not providing. Is there a process, Madam CAO? Can you inquire if there's a process for the municipality to participate in this or comment on this, or would that be through our member on the board?
I think it could be both, but certainly we can make the inquiry and then let you know if it would be more appropriate to come through the member on the board.
Okay, that'd be great, because they are part of our economic development when you see the traffic they generate. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I just have a question, Councilman Bloomer. What sort of participation are you envisioning?
Well, just simply that when they come up with a list, or if we had a preference of the ones that we feel the community values, or how are they, just to understand how are they valuing these, how are they making that determination? That's all. It's
okay.
Not that we'd be significantly involved, but it'd be nice to be considered a stakeholder and be able to comment on which ones they're going to.
No, I was thinking you were looking for financial participation.
Oh,
no, that's fine.
No, not
Feedback
necessarily.
if they're going to sell it on us.
Just
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
thank you for asking, though, Councillor Spoulis.
All right, on to the next one is the Enbridge Union. Any questions or comments? Ontario Energy Board notice to customers. Doesn't look like a very big increase. No, okay, so that's it for intergovernmental affairs. Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Spoulis, that the intergovernmental affair correspondence items listed on the council agenda for the January 23rd, 2019 council meeting be received. All in favor? Carried. All right. Intergovernmental affairs. We have reports. Doesn't look like we have any. Moved by Councillor Spoulis, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that council appoints, do we have anyone? We have to talk about it, to the Wellington Farm and Home Safety Association for the 2018-2022 term of council, or until successors are appointed. Open it up for Councillor Bulmer.
Well, I was willing to stand subject to my availability for the night, and I found it's, according to what I got, it was usually the last Tuesday of the month, so unless someone else, I think Councillor Roth indicated a potential interest as well, but I'd be willing to put my name forward.
Councillor Roth, are you willing
Well,
to?
I think that's a great idea.
Sounds like you're appointed.
No, it is Wellington Farm and Home. I'm not a farmer. You're on 2 committees, I'm on 3, so I think it's a good fit.
We appreciate it, Councillor Bulmer. So I'll read it again. Moved by Councillor Spoulis, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that council appoints Councillor Bulmer to the Wellington Farm and Home Safety Association for the 2018-2022 term of council until successors are appointed. All in favor? Carried. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. What's next? All right. Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Bulmer, that council receives the application for noise exemption for Wellington Common Elements Condo Corp. number 214, Mini Lakes, and the council authorizes an exemption to Section 4 prohibitions by time and place and Schedule 2, number 1 of bylaw 5001-05 to permit the use of a scare gun to scare away geese at the Mini Lakes Residents Association for the period of February 1st, 2019 to May 31st, 2019 between the hours of 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., August 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019, between the hours of 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. January 1st, 2020 to May 31st, 2020, between the hours of 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. August 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, between the hours of 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that the MF Property Management Ltd. Be directed to notify the Ontario Provincial Police of the noise exemption. All in favor? Carried. Do we need comments? Carried. Okay. Anything's done. Wellington County Report on Bill 66. So, moved by Councillor Balmer, seconded by Councillor Roth, that the Wellington County Report, Bill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act 2018, be received for information. Do we want to have any discussion on that, or Councillor Balmer?
Yes, thank you. I got to say that probably one of the most valuable lessons I've learned over the years here on council is that it's the public participation in the planning process that really builds trust, lends credibility to the decision, and actually leads to much better decisions. The public process allows us to draw on the expertise of our residents. They bring to light things we don't know, things we hadn't thought of. And so when I look and see in Bill 66, these open for business bylaws that propose to eliminate that public process, I am concerned. I'm all for business. I think we've done a good job in developing our industrial lands and our commercial lands, and I want to see those develop. And I like what we saw in the discussions previously about the places to grow. We're looking at protecting employment lands along transportation corridors. I think that's valuable. But the suggestion that we should support a process, or the creation of a process that eliminates the public participation in the planning process, I struggle with supporting that, and I'd actually like to propose that the council oppose Bill 66 for that reason, or send a letter to that effect, that the open for business bylaws are not, I don't think, in the public's best interest.
Okay. Councillor Goyda?
I actually, from reading this, pulled the same sort of thought as you're talking about, Councillor Balmer, that this framework seems to cut out the public meeting, the public consultation, the ability to submit appeals. And I don't think that's consistent with council's approach to public consultation and community engagement. And I find that very troubling as well. I know that the comment period has closed as of January the 20th, but it is actually, in speaking with staff today, that we likely still are able to submit comment, and I would encourage at least that component to be addressed in some form or way in terms of a letter or a comment or feedback.
Okay. Councillor Spools?
Yes, I have the same concern. I'm going to suggest a differing approach, that we as council put forward and support a motion that in the event that this act is passed, that we will follow our usual public consultation process. In other words, we assure our community that, sure, it's there, but we're going to follow what we normally do, is consult with the public.
Okay. Councillor Roth?
Well, the way I read this is, you don't have to have a public meeting, but you certainly can. So it doesn't eliminate a public meeting. It just stresses that you wouldn't have to have one. So I certainly wouldn't be in favor of doing anything under this new bill without a public meeting. I think we all agree on that. So I'm not totally against this bill. I think there could be some good things for Pushlands come out of this. But to say we're against it, I don't think that's the right approach either. And I like to think, again, if I'm understanding this correctly, we don't do this unless we have an application, right? If this passes, we don't pass a bylaw saying we're open for business unless we have an application, and then it's to a specific property, right? So
That's
if
correct.
council, at that time, we could put in there that we are going to have the due public process. But I certainly wouldn't be in favor of just sending off a letter saying we don't support this bill.
I'd like to speak first. I agree with Councillor Roth that, the first time I read this at the county level, the wording was that the municipality is not required to have a public meeting. And now they've added in that, you still can. And I think that's a priority for this council. And, whether it's done through a policy, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't go over very well if we decided not to have public information meetings. That's very important to myself. And there are so many conditions for this to come into effect. You have to prove there's so many new jobs created, and there's other restrictions. So I agree with Councillor Roth that I wouldn't be supportive of sending a letter completely against this bill, but we have a responsibility to provide public input for anything regarding planning. So I don't think we would put that to the wayside. Councillor Bulmer, did you have another comment?
Yeah, thank you. No, and I understand the other perspective on this. However, what this would permit is a neighboring municipality to take one of these actions, which would then override source water protection legislation, override greenbelt legislation, override a number of things which could affect a neighboring municipality. And above and beyond simply holding a public meeting, the public process allows for that this would still provide, in this you're talking maybe a public meeting, but the public process that's currently part of the planning process allows for the application to be massaged, amended, and perhaps gain the trust of the community. To the specific requirements, I guess one of the ones that I have the most difficulty with is this piece about an X number of jobs. That's great. What happens if those jobs don't materialize? Do we take the zoning away? Does they have to tear down the factory and go away? These are the sorts of things that planning decisions are not typically based on. And so I just think it's somewhat problematic in terms of how we would, even if we were to pass a piece in the future saying, well, we won't use these, that would not preclude a future generation from future council from using them, or a neighboring municipality use such a thing, which might have significant negative consequences for our own municipality. So it's just, I just see it as undermining a lot of good processes and legislation that people have invested in and count on for protection, not just within their own municipality, but in neighboring municipalities. So, but I understand the alternative perspective as well.
Okay. Do you want to say, Councillor Miguel?
I just would suggest that maybe instead of writing a letter saying that council objects to the entire bill, that maybe we could identify the specific pieces that we're finding troubling and address it that way.
Councillor Spoulos.
We could, as Councillor Goda suggests. I'm looking at this. This is going to be a done deal. So are we spinning our wheels, putting something forward? I think we are. I think the best thing to do is reassure our residents and our potential future business people that we will follow a public consultation process.
Councillor Roth?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a done deal to have a large majority government, and it's going to get passed. So any consultation that went in before the due date and anything that comes in after,
Done.
And we still have the option of never
Using it.
So, and we can't control what our neighboring municipalities do in a lot of areas. So I don't think this is a real big deal. In fact, I think anything I've seen, most of the cities are not in favor of it at all because it's interfering with their planning staff and their official plans. And so I don't think it's a big issue at this point.
Do we have does somebody want to propose a motion for a letter or anything, or can we just agree that we're just going to, do you want to propose something, Councilor?
Just a motion of council that we will follow the public process in the event this bill gets passed.
Do we have a seconder?
Well, I think we can,
Just agree to that?
just, when the time comes, I think we can do
Okay,
it.
fair enough. Okay, I'll take withdraw.
If that's all right.
Oh, Madame CEO would like to.
Just before council does take the vote, I just want to make council aware, just because there has been information that has come in since the printing of your agenda, just in terms of resolutions from other municipalities and communications, which you perhaps maybe did receive directly. There have been some communications come in just from a Joan Matho, a Becky Sapong, an Arlene Slocum, and Wellington Water Watchers, just indicating that they didn't support it. In case you didn't receive that directly, I know that we received it here, and I know Nina has subsequently sent it out. And just so that you're aware, Halton Region did pass a resolution just not in support and indicating the reasons that this council has already expressed and indicating that they would like to see upper tier approval. Georgina indicated that they wouldn't support, but again, had the same types of conversations that this council is having, just in terms of ensuring that if it does go through, that there will be a public process. And Orangeville was the same.
And Region Waterloo, I think, too.
So I don't think we were intending to have a vote. We were just going to, okay. Okay, so moved by Councillor Balmer, seconded by Councillor Roth, that the Wellington County Report Bill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act 2018 be received for information. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Roth, seconded by Councillor Balmer, that Report Building 2019-001 with respect to the Building Department monthly update December 2018 be received for information. Any questions or comments before the vote? All in favor? Carried. Where are we? Nothing from Roads and Parks, Recreation, none. Mayor's update. So I'll maybe talk a little bit about the Mill Creek spill. It's been a frustrating process. The weather has not been facilitating an easy job for the individuals down there. You know, as well as trespassers, maybe not trespassing is a tough word, but there's been a lot of public coming into the job site and has kind of been hindering the contractors to do their job. And then misinformation coming out and just generally not even a lot of information, but they're working diligently. I think I don't know if everybody received the email, they had a smell of jet fuel past Shades Mill. So that's concerning, but with the ice, they really don't know, and I think we're not going to see the full impact of the affected area until we have a thaw and we start seeing more sheen. You know, we just have to rely on the MOE for their reports. They get posted to the Puslinch website. If you have people contacting you, direct them to the Puslinch website. That's what we've been instructed to do, and it does, like I mentioned, seem a little frustrating, but that's the avenue we've been given currently. I don't know if Madame CEO wants to add to that.
All I can add is that the Ministry of Environment has, sorry, there was a bug that just flew in front of my eyes. The Ministry of the Environment has indicated that they will provide updates as they have them, and so the township is posting those updates on the township website. And as the mayor has just indicated, there was one just recently posted by staff just at about 5 o'clock today, so you can direct residents there to get the updates.
And I'll make some more comments. I've been asked whether I should be making interviews. My role so far, I have my Connect with Mayor James Seeley Facebook page, and so I have 350 or so followers. As soon as there's an update on the Puslinch website, I post it on there, and I'm only allowed to put a link, but then there's also some other privately operated Facebook pages that are called The Voice of Puslinch, what's happening in Puslinch, and these are avenues to get the message out, and the feedback I've been receiving is that people are appreciating that, and that's the extent I can go at this current time, but I think it's working well. I've made a few trips down to the individual that owns the land onto Mill Creek. I've made several phone calls. The communication hasn't been working very well, but I've left messages informing him that I want to facilitate him receiving the information. And so I just want to let you guys know that I'm getting the information out there on the social media, and maybe when we have discussions in the future about township's role in social media, that would, you know, there's an example of where it would facilitate the residents receiving that information. All right. I think that's it for Mayor's updates. Notice of motion, so I think this is where I hand the gavel over to Councillor Balmer, and you take the chair role. Sure.
Okay, I can do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
All right, members of council, we have a notice of motion here from Mayor Sealy with respect to an amendment to the procedural bylaw. And if I could ask Madam CAO if you would be so kind as to read the motion.
I will.
Thank you.
Whereas bylaw number 5908, being a bylaw to establish the procedure for meetings of council, establishes the following for ordinary meetings of council. Council shall meet on the first Wednesday of each month at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and the third Wednesday of each month at 7 o'clock in the evening. And whereas changes in the 2019 council meeting schedule are hereby requested, now therefore that staff bring forward a bylaw to amend bylaw number 5908, being a bylaw to establish the procedure for meetings of council as follows for the 2019 calendar council meeting schedule. So the current schedule would be for April 3rd and April 17th. The proposed meeting dates are for April 10th and April 24th. The current meeting schedule for May is May 1st, 2019 and May 15th, 2019. The proposed meeting dates would be May 8th, 2019 and May 22nd, 2019. The current schedule has a meeting for October 16th, 2019. The proposed meeting dates would be October 9th, 2019, and then the October 23rd, 2019 morning operating budget and evening regular council meeting on October 23rd. And that is the entirety of the motion.
Okay, thank you, Madam CEO. Do we have currently, is it signed with a mover and a seconder yet?
No seconder as of yet.
Okay, so just to clarify, we're looking, I guess I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder before I could put it on the table for discussion. Do I have a mover?
You have the mover as being Mayor Sealy.
Oh, okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion then?
Councillor Goyda.
Oh, thank you. Put a bell on your hand. So I have a seconder from Councillor Goyda, so I'll put the motion on the table. So just to clarify, what this is requesting is something, I guess, similar to what we've seen here in January, if I can understand it, shifting back.
If you would like, Mr. Chair, I'd maybe just explain the process I went through for those dates. Would that help?
Well, I understood there. I just wanted to, so I'll open up for discussion, and maybe perhaps any councillors have any questions, they can ask the CAO. I believe the chair has excused himself from the discussions of this. Is that correct?
I don't believe so.
No?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
No.
I'll just chair it then.
Yes.
So Councillor Goyda.
No, I have spoken with the mayor about these dates. I understand that he has made a lot of effort to try and adhere to the schedule as best as he can, using as many vacation and holiday and shift changes. And I initially was asking if maybe it makes more sense to keep the evening meetings as they are, due to the fact that they're usually more public oriented, and perhaps only move the daytime meetings. However, I didn't realize that then that would mean we'd have 2 meetings back-to-back consecutive weeks, which would put a strain on staff. And so as it stands, the way it is now, I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Councillor Goyda. Councillor Sapoulis?
Yes, I struggled with this one. Originally, I thought, well, that's no problem. But then the more I looked into it, I went online to see if there were any other councils that had changed dates because one member could not attend. That's one member. And I'm saying, well, the precedent, if we do this, then what about any other councillor who's got a conflict? We're setting a precedent that we're allowing one member of council this latitude, and what about the other members of council? And I think it's inappropriate to allow one and not the other. For that reason, I'm saying let's keep it pure the way it is. I can understand if there's a reason why numerous members of council can't make it because of a conference or some other urgent issue that it's rescheduled, but as a rule, I would say we'd stick to the dates because we set a precedent, and other members of council will be free to do the same thing.
So just to keep with the order that we've established this evening, Mayor Sealy, if you don't mind, I'll go to Councillor Roth next. Thank you, Councillor Sapoulis.
That's fine, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Roth.
Yes, thank you. This request for a change to the procedural bylaw to accommodate the schedule of an elected official raises concerns. All candidates received the meeting schedule prior to the election. This not only made candidates aware of the meeting schedule, but should have helped with their commitment to run for office. Also, staff plans for and around all these meeting dates to ensure proper preparation and reports are in place, complete and on time. Another concern is the public. Council meetings, to my knowledge, have always been consistent. This could have the potential to add confusion and cost to changing meeting dates. Now, I cannot speak for staff, but they probably could plan around this request. I can, however, speak for myself. If this request is granted, I will be absent for 3 of the meetings in the proposed new schedule. We have a schedule for alternates to chair council meetings in the absence of the mayor. The mayor has 1 vote, as do other councillors. The mayor's vote has equal influence and importance as any other council member. Now, I'm going to be out of the country for 2 weeks. I will be absent for 1 meeting. Should I request a change to the procedural bylaw? I believe any councillor has the same rights as the mayor to do so. We have to think of the chaos this could create for staff, other councillors, and most important, the public.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Mayor Sealy?
Yeah, and the basis of it was the fact that trying to ensure attendance, and I understand Councillor Rose's position that the schedule was out. It did come out later, and I've exhausted my vacation days. The schedule for this, this first year of the term of council has been very compressed. So. With the day trade. So unfortunately, I didn't consult with Councillor Roth about the conflicts. The one of most concern for me is the operating budget. I think the mayor should be in attendance for the operating budget. If we want to amend the motion to the basis was that there was 1 conflict in the month, which is the first one of April and May. And then if we move the 1 down, it conflicted with 2 because we'd be back to back. So I would be prepared to amend this motion to remove the April and May movement dates, but I do think it's important that your mayor is here for the operating budget. I don't know if we have a seconder for that. What do we... Mr. Chair, so that would be my suggestion. I would remove the April and May movements, and then I would like to keep the October one in so that I can attend the morning capital budget evening.
Well, just to clarify then, you'd like to amend the motion?
Correct.
And you'd like to amend the motion where we're going to remove the request to change the meetings in April and May?
Correct.
And only change the operational, so all the council meetings will stay as scheduled and change the operational budget meeting in October.
Correct. I believe Madame CEO.
Yes, if I can just maybe perhaps provide some clarification. The October 16th date change is the actual council meeting date in the evening. So we would be just moving the council meeting date to the evening of the day that you have your operating budget. So you have operating budget, you would have operating budget in the morning of the 23rd, and you would have the evening council session on October 23rd instead of October the 16th. Does everyone follow me?
Okay, so currently it's planned for the 16th, the council meeting?
Council meeting in the evening, so basically you're shifting it 1 week later to October 23rd. And in that particular...
you know what? So...
That's not what this
You know
says.
what? No,
No.
you know what? I'll sorry to interrupt,
That's
Madam
okay.
CEO.
That's okay.
I was reading this, so
That's November.
I won't miss the operating budget. It's the conflicts. I don't have my schedule in front of me.
Yeah,
for
it's the conflict with the
six-
16th that you would have. So it's just to clarify, that's where the conflict would be. And I'll just point out for council's information that there are actually three. So I told you that there's a reason why I'm not the director of finance. There are 5 Wednesdays in that particular month of October. So that would mean that you would just move your October 16th from the 3rd to the 4th Wednesday in that particular month.
And I guess it's still, sorry, Mr. Chair, just to talk of that, I would still touch on Councillor Rose's concern that it's moving a council meeting to accommodate my schedule, but, so I'll amend the motion. I made some sacrifices, and I understand I signed up for this position, but I'll drop the 2 if you're willing to accommodate to have your mayor at, for the 1 council meeting in October, change it to the 9th. I'll amend the motion, and we'll just go from there. It either passes or it doesn't.
Just to clarify, we're now down to the amended motion would be to change the October 16th operational budget meeting and council meeting to the 23rd. Is that what we're talking about now?
Correct. Well,
No,
not the budget, it's the
yeah, the budget
council
is already
meeting.
scheduled
It's the
for the
council meeting.
23rd. The
Budget's
council
already
meeting scheduled for the
Council
16th.
meeting.
Okay, so we're down to asking to move 1 council meeting, October 16th
To
to
October 23rd.
October 23rd. Okay, so then do I have a seconder for considering that amended motion so we can all discuss that?
Councillor Goyda?
Councillor Goda, would you, as the seconder of the first, would you accept as the second that so we can discuss it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Councillor Goyda, thank you. I'll open it up for discussions then. Councillor Goyda, would you like to discuss the amended motion?
In light of the information that Councillor Roth is equally inconvenienced by these schedule changes, I would support that only if Councillor Roth is able to attend that meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Goyda. Councillor Sapoulis?
So on a clarification from CEO, it says this current schedule is October 16th, and you have a proposed meeting date of October the 9th. What does that mean then?
I'm not sure why the October 9th is there. That's an error, I
Okay.
have to say, because your first meeting in October is actually October 2nd. And it shouldn't say proposed, because your meeting would have been October 2nd, and October 16th is your regular meeting schedule. There is nothing on October 9th. So you're just moving the October 16th to the 23rd. Yeah.
Okay, is that it for,
Also,
is Councillor Sapoulis?
I'm still unclear because you're saying that the October 16th meeting is now going to be October 23, 1 week later, correct?
That's what's on the floor.
Okay, and the morning budget, the budget has been already set for the morning, and this will be a moved
Yes,
evening.
so you would deal with budget in the morning, and you would come back for your regular council meeting in the evening of the 23rd.
Again, I revert to my original position. Any member of councils, we set a precedent, any member of council can say, look, I can't make it on that day for whatever reason. Let's put a motion forward so I can make it. I think it's sets a precedent that we shouldn't be going down the road.
Thank you. Councillor Roth?
I need to know what the dates are for as scheduled for October. The council. meeting.
Okay,
Not
just
budget.
council meetings, I won't.
Just
speak.
council meeting.
October 2nd, October 16th.
Okay. Now, the mayor's concern is being here for the operating budget meeting. Now, this is a budget meeting, probably one of the earliest ones we're going to have for the 2020 budget, right?
If I may just clarify, and the mayor can correct me, but there was just a miscommunication with respect to what meeting he needed to change. So he can be here for the operating budget on the 23rd. It's the October 16th council meeting.
Okay. Well, again, I would be willing to change a budget meeting, and that's what the mayor's concern was. But I think we're going down the wrong path if we change council meetings. Council meetings, as long as I've lived in this township, have been the same. And I think it's the wrong road to go down, because if we do it for one, we have to do it for everyone. and then you're trying to, like, just look at the confusion we've added to this tonight. So I can't support this.
Thank you. Mayor Seeley, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I have thoughts. You know, with what's going around the table and to alleviate any, you know, any further turmoil, I'll remove the motion entirely. Just, yeah, I think that maybe is the better route to go. I appreciate council's input on the matter, and I'll just, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Seeley, and I return the chair to you then.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, so,
Got municipal announcements before you get into this stuff.
okay, so we have, let me find it on my laptop here.
Yep.
Just got locked on me. Do we have any municipal announcements? Councillor Muller. Just your turn.
I really want to thank staff for that workshop we had last week regarding leadership and councils working effectively. I think we just saw a good example tonight of council having a very honest, open, and frank discussion about a difficult issue, and I think that's a testament to how well we work together. And I really think that the person you brought in last week was great. But I do want to mention that I haven't forgotten the commitment I made at the end of that meeting to be more concise, and I recognize that may not have come to pass just yet, but I will work on that next month.
We love you, man.
Thank you.
Okay, any other municipal announcements?
I share the same sentiments about the training session last week, and other than that, I have no updates.
Two items. I look forward to Councillor Bulmer improving.
Being more concise.
Second thing is Green Legacy Municipal Tree Day. We're looking at scheduling it for April the 27th. And I'm going to propose that we have it from 8:30 till 10:30 instead of 8:30 till 11. Last couple of years noticed that by 10:30 everything's gone and done. The other thing I was going to look at is seeing if we can get Crime Stoppers there at the same time to sell the mulch. In other words, you buy a tree, buy some mulch, get a tree, buy some mulch type of thing. So that's sort of try to make it a more
Community thing.
a community event type of thing. So that's the plan right now. And Mr. Creek can make sure we get the shed and can make arrangements sort of the day before to arrange the tables. Be great. That's all.
What was the date for that again?
April 27th. Are you away?
No, I'm not. You mentioned Crime Stoppers, and they also do shredding. So if you couldn't get them to sell mulch, maybe you could get them to have their shredder there.
Okay, that's a good point.
It's another, it could draw some people.
And then you can use that as mulch.
Then you can use that. Staples and all.
Okay, I'll try that on for size too.
And I'll be there.
Great. Any help would be appreciated.
I have nothing.
Okay, I don't think, do we have anything from municipal announcements? I don't believe I do. All right, on to unfinished business. Nothing? All right, are we here now? Moved by Councillor Ballmer, seconded by Councillor Roth, that the following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. A, being a bylaw to appoint a council member to the Planning and Development Advisory Committee, Committee of Adjustment. Conversation. Anybody interested? When does it meet?
Oh, no, this
Already
is
done.
the one- We're just confirming the appointment.
Oh,
from
confirm,
last time.
oh, okay, sorry.
We had to do the report, and now we have to do the bylaw.
All right, so we're confirming the appointment. All in favor? All right, my bad. Okay, moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Ballmer, that the following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 007-2019 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation, Township of Puslinch, at its meeting held the 23rd day of January 2019. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Counselor Balmer, seconded by Counselor Roth. That council hereby be adjourned at 9 p.m.
But
on the money. All in favor?